Okay, welcome everyone to our February Q&A on astrology for the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. Again, we are just coming to the end of the Rashi and signs, the focus on the Rashi and signs. So we want to focus on that today. We will be digging into the bhavas and the houses coming up next month and into the following month. I've got a few questions that have already been sent to me that we need to look at. But those of you who have questions, again, focusing on the Rashis and signs, you can go ahead and type them in the chat box while we go. That way, once we get through the questions that have been emailed, for those who might not be able to be here today, we can speak to your questions. We're going to do our best to get through all of them. Some of these questions, it looks like, might take a little more involved discussion, but we'll see how it goes. So let's get started. All right. Can you review your preferred method of calculating the Hora and why? And again, what is the reason for having the three methods to calculate the Hora? We definitely went over this in the program, but let's talk about it again. So the person is asking, can you review how the Hora is calculated, the D2? And this is very important to the Rashis and signs class, because as we know, the Vargas are simply fractals or deeper representations of what's going on in the Rashi. And there are different ways of calculating the Hora. And there are three predominant ways that I know of, and one that I like to use most. So the way I like to do it is very simple. And we can share the screen again if it's not already still up there. Okay. So the way that we want to look at calculating the Hora, we're going to look at each sign. And since the Hora deals with the number 2, the sign is divided in half, which means there is the first 15 degrees of the sign, and then there is the second 15 degrees of the sign. Now, the way I like to calculate the Hora is very simple. Essentially, all we do is we look to see where the planet is in the sign. And so if the planet is in the first 15 degrees of the sign, then that planet stays in that sign. If the planet is in the second half of the sign, the second 15 degrees, the planet goes in the sign directly opposite. So we'll just illustrate here. Let's start with K2. We've got the Hora over here. So we've got K2 at 1450 of Aries, which means that it's in the first 15 degrees of Aries. And that's going to tell us that K2 stays in Aries in the Hora. And sure enough, here we go. We can see K2 is in Aries in the Hora. We can go around to Jupiter. Jupiter is at 531 of Cancer. Well, that's in the first 15 degrees of Cancer, which means that Jupiter stays in the Hora of Cancer. Same with Mars. Mars is in the first 15 degrees of Leo. Mars stays in Leo. But now we've got Saturn at 29 degrees of Leo, which is in the second 15 degrees of Leo. And so where does Saturn go in the Hora? It goes in the sign directly opposite. So it's going to go opposite Leo. And the way this works is, again, if it's in the second 15 degrees, it goes in the opposite sign of the sign that it is in the Rashi. We'll continue. Rahu, we have in Libra. Again, 1450, first 15 degrees. So Rahu stays in Libra. Venus is at 302 of Scorpio. So Venus is going to stay in Scorpio in the Hora. The Sun, however, is at 20 degrees 05 of Scorpio. So where does it go? Directly opposite in the Hora. We can see here in the chart, the Hora chart, the Sun then goes to Taurus. And finally, both Mercury and Moon are in Sagittarius here. Moon's at 9 degrees, Mercury's at 4 degrees. So therefore, it's going to stay in the Hora of Sagittarius. Now, that's the way I like to calculate the planet. The reason I like to calculate the Hora that way, the reason I like to calculate the Hora that way is because it shows a more direct view of the give and take. So this way of doing it, it gives you better details about the person's ability to meet their responsibilities, to manage their wealth, to manage the give and take of what is needed to build wealth, of what is needed to build a relationship, and what is needed to, in a sense, have firm boundaries to keep a relationship or to keep one's wealth strong and healthy. And that's really because what we see here is this way of calculating the Hora. It divides the Rashi into 1-7 relationship. It's either going to be in the same sign or in the sign opposite, the 1-7 relationship. So it shows this capacity for flow and exchange of energy related to the seventh sign, Libra, which deals specifically with bartering, trade, commerce, and those types of things. So it gives you, in a sense, a deeper insight into sign 7 in that way. Now, of course, there are other ways to calculate the Hora. There's the way that many people do and many softwares do, where it's just a solar lunar breakdown, meaning the planets are either going into Leo or they're going into Cancer. And essentially what that does is it shows us the balance of the person's innate masculine and feminine energies, the balance that's there. And some planets are going to do better in Cancer. Some planets are going to do better in Leo. It's just going to depend. But it shows that balance between the masculine and feminine, or the solar and lunar, or the positive and negative. The third way, which I also think is very accurate, I mean, accurate in the sense of very helpful when it comes to wealth and gains and finances and things, is the way Yavana Jataka teaches it. And I think if I explain it, you already know it, but I'll explain it one more time, because we did cover this in the Rashis and Science class of the apprenticeship program. It shows us our ability to benefit from gains, because the way it's divided up is the planet will either stay where it is, or it will go into the 11th sign away from it. So just like in my preferred method, it will stay in the Rashi sign if it's in the first 15 degrees, or will go in the 7th. Well, in the third way of calculating it, essentially what we see is if we have a planet like Mars in the first 15 degrees of Leo, well, Mars will remain in Leo. But if it was in the second 15 degrees, it would then move into the 11th house away from it. And we see how that makes sense, because the 11th house deals with gains. And when you make a chart, a Hora like that, it's going to show you just how well the person accepts gains in their life and how they manage the resources of the gains in their life. So there's all kinds of different ways, at least 3, of calculating the Hora, and they each have a specific reason for being calculated that way. They give us just a little further refinement of what we're going to see from the chart. So I think that answers that question. Let me just double check, make sure. The question was, can you review your preferred method of calculating the Hora and why? Yes. Also, what is the reason of having 3 methods to calculate the Hora? Yes. So I believe we answered that one. And that might be the last one that had been sent to us.